3, 2, 1.
Nice.
Oh, hey there. So today we're going to be making some homemade, handmade gifts. Gifts I'm sure like anyone would love to get because these are gifts that are edible, which is always really nice. And it's perfect for the holidays or anytime you need to give a gift really. And you can customize every single one of them. We'll share with you how you can do that when we go through each one. So let's dive right in. The first gift idea is muffins in a jar. And this particular recipe is for a spiced chocolate, walnut, and fig muffin. So essentially what we're gonna do is prep the ingredients needed to make the muffins in a 1 liter mason jar. First, we're gonna add half of a cup of flour to the jar. I'd suggest adding in the flour using a spoon if you can. And then once it's all added in, we can very gently give the jar a tap or shake on the counter just to level out this first layer. Then we're gonna use a pastry brush. I highly recommend using this to just clean the sides of the jar of any flour residue that might be there before we then add in 3 tablespoons of cocoa or cacao powder. So you'll see that even though I added the cocoa powder as like gently as I could, there's still like a whole bunch of residue that's up along the side of the jar, plus our layers are like not even at all. But that's why it's really important to have the pastry brush, because then you can level out the layers and then you can also use it to just clean the side of the jars. Then we're gonna add in another half cup of flour, creating a new layer. Next into the jar, we're gonna add in a 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar, followed by the final half cup of flour. You can see that this already requires a little bit of patience, but I think it's pretty fun and it feels just like doing a little bit of arts and crafts. Next, to a small bowl, we're gonna add in a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. We're using raw sugar here, along with 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon each of ground ginger and salt, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of optional ground cardamom. As you're stirring it, there's this lovely aroma that fills the air, which is really nice. So now that it's all stirred together, we can add it to the jar as a layer of its own. For the next dry ingredient, we're going to be adding in 1 cup of almond flour. You can either buy almond flour at the store, or you can make it yourself by blending in a food processor some raw almonds until you get a flour-like consistency. Okay, so the next part I think is the funnest part. We're gonna grab like a small ladle or like a measuring spoon, and we're gonna use it to very firmly press down on this top layer. And you'll see that it's gonna compact all of the layers that are beneath it, which helps to free up some space at the top of the jar for what we're gonna add in next. But also compacting the layers, I feel like just makes it easier to transport as well. Next, what we'll do is we'll coarsely chop half of a cup of nuts. I'm gonna be using raw walnuts, but you can use any nut here that you'd like. I think pecans would work especially well, so we're gonna add this to the jar as well. And then we'll also chop up about half of a cup of dried figs, or feel free to substitute it for any other dried fruit that you'd like cranberry, mango, or apricot. Then as the final layer, we're gonna be adding to the jar half of a cup of vegan chocolate chips. And then we can pop the lid onto the jar. Feel free to wrap some ribbon or string around it or anything else you'd like to decorate it with. So that's pretty much it. The gift is ready. The jar is super cute, ready to gift to someone. And the person who's receiving it, they might not necessarily know how to turn this jar into muffins. So there's one last thing you're gonna need to do, which is just to write out a few directions for them onto a piece of paper. Or if you'd like, we've actually already typed it up for you and you can just print it out. It's a little card that you can cut out and you can give it together with your jar. And now let's say that Robin is the person who's receiving it. I'm just gonna walk you through the steps on what they need to do. It's super quick and easy.
Ready to make it?
So all they need to do is just empty the contents of the jar right into a large bowl, and then this just can be stirred until it's well combined. And then they only need to add in 2 ingredients of their own, 1 cup of a plant-based milk and 1/3 of a cup of an unflavored vegetable oil. This can be stirred again into the dry mixture until all of it is just combined, and then the batter can be divided into a lightly greased muffin tin. Robin's just adding a little bit of chopped walnuts and figs to the top for garnish, but this is definitely not necessary. And then it can be baked in the preheated oven at 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius for about 20 to 25 minutes. Once it's removed from the oven and once it's cooled down a bit, the muffins are ready to enjoy. They're really soft, moist, gently spiced, not too sweet, but deliciously festive tasting. For For the next gift idea, we're gonna be making some chocolate bark, and it's one that I've called Rocky Mountain chocolate bark. So we're gonna first start off by making some caramel shards. This is just one ingredient, super easy, but let's first have at the ready a baking tray with some parchment paper on it. Then what we can do is add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar to a dry pan on the stove on medium-high heat. So now that we've added in the sugar, we really want to resist the urge to stir, and that's why it's important to use a heavy-bottomed pan. It means that the heat is distributing quite evenly along the whole bottom, so the sugar will kind of dissolve at an even rate throughout. Eventually it's going to turn into this light golden color, and then we're going to want to stir it only once it's pretty much completely melted. And once we've stirred it, we can remove it from the heat, and then we're going to pour it onto our parchment-lined baking tray. Be careful because it's going to be super hot, so don't touch it. But using the back of a rubber spatula, we can quickly spread it out into a very thin layer and then let it sit and cool for about 5 minutes altogether. Once it is cooled, you're going to be left with this beautiful glass sheet of caramelized sugar, which can then be broken or cut into little shards. The reason I like to use this on chocolate bark is it gives it not only a really beautiful look, but also a really nice crunch and this smoky sweetness, which is really nice. But we'll just set this aside for now. We're then going to move on to prepping all of the other toppings that we're going to want on top of the bark. Get creative here. Personally, I'm going to be chopping up a 1/4 cup of roasted hazelnuts, about a 1/4 cup of banana chips as well, and 2 gingerbread style biscuits, but you can use any biscuits or cookies that you'd like here. And then once the toppings are ready, we can start to melt our chocolate. I'm gonna do this by creating a double boiler, which just means placing a heat-safe bowl on top of some gently boiling water, to which I'm gonna be adding 400 grams of broken up vegan dark chocolate. Just a little tip about the chocolate too. It's best to go for a chocolate that you really enjoy the taste of and that you would eat on its own, because that's essentially what the person is gonna be doing who you gift this to. And once the chocolate is melted, we're going to remove the bowl from the heat. Just be careful because the bowl will be hot. And then we're going to pour the chocolate onto the same parchment-lined baking tray. And then using a rubber spatula, we're going to gently spread out the melted chocolate to create one large sheet that's about 1/2 centimeter thick. And then I'm personally gonna drizzle over top a couple of teaspoons of peanut butter. This is optional though. And then we can sprinkle over top the rest of our toppings. I've got some banana chips again, some roasted hazelnuts, our biscuit crumbles, just a little sprinkle of sea salt if you'd like, and of course, those beautiful caramel shards. Then using a spoon, I'm just gonna very gently press the toppings into the chocolate so it's secure in there, and then we can pop the bark in the fridge for at least an hour to harden. Once it has been refrigerated, just let it sit at room temperature for a minute or two, and then comes the fun part, which is to cut little triangles of various shapes and sizes out of the sheet of chocolate. Once it's all cut up, we can transfer the chocolate bark to a gift box of your choosing. We're just using an upcycled chocolate box with some crumpled up parchment paper lining just to make it look cute. And that's pretty much it. This Rocky Mountain chocolate bark is ready to gift, and you can always customize it, like we said, by adding whatever toppings you'd like. There's hardly any way that you could go wrong here, but just let the person who's receiving the gift know to store the bark in the fridge and not at room temperature, otherwise the chocolate does tend to go cloudy. For the final recipe, we're going to be making a lovely cinnamon and vanilla nut butter. So this nut butter is going to be made using 1.5 cups each of raw cashews and raw pecans. But if you're missing either one of these nuts, I'd recommend substituting it for raw almonds instead. So once they're all spread out onto a baking tray, we can pop them in a preheated oven at 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius. And then after about 7 minutes, the pecans should already be toasted well enough. So we're gonna remove these from the tray, give the cashews a little stir, and then return them to the oven to continue to bake for another 5 to 7 minutes or so, or until they're lightly golden. So just keep in mind that with nuts, they tend to keep toasting even after they've been taken out of the oven, so just be careful not to toast it too long. Once the nuts have cooled off just a little bit, we can already go ahead and add them to a food processor, along with 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then we're gonna blend this on high for about 5 to 7 minutes, stopping to scrape down the sides as needed. And blending it for longer is really what helps to just get it to that smooth consistency, which is so lovely in nut butters. So once it's blended to your liking, we can then divide the nut butter into some jars. For decoration, I feel like there's so many different ways you could decorate this. For us, we've just wrapped some twine around our jars, and you can always add a little bit of plant cuttings if you'd like, maybe a little spoon to accompany it. That always looks really cute. But you can also just make it for yourself. It's super delicious, really good for you, great on toast and smoothies. Or my new obsession is just to enjoy it as a snack. I feel like the cinnamon vanilla nuttiness goes so well with some crunchy apple slices. Oh my goodness, so good. Definitely recommend trying it out. So happy gift giving, friends, and if you're interested in other like edible gift ideas, I feel like cookies or granola, that's always my go-to because it looks so cute when you gift it in little jars. Those are always a really good bet, and we have some recipes for those on the blog too, so I'll leave some links for you in the description box, plus I'll leave the videos that we've like shown you how to make them in at the end of today's video in case you're interested. But thanks so much for being here with us, really appreciate it. Pickle Limes signing off, and we'll see you in the next video. And you see that that's gonna, one more, and then that's it. Don't let me do it again. Firmly and evenly on the whole top layer. Let me do it one. Made with those things. Bye.